Solana has dropped by over 23% since the 29th of July, and it has just started to come down into our lower range expectations. I'm going to be going through my short, medium, and long-term price predictions for Solana in today's video. If you do find it useful and informative, smash that like button. I really do appreciate that. If you are new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe and stay up to date with all the content that we do here at Cheeky Crypto. Let's jump right down into today's video. So here we have Solana paired up with USDT. We're on the 1 day Binance chart here, and you can see that on the 29th of July we came into our high range fifth wave expectations between $190 and $198. From here we saw this immediate rejection and move to the downside. This is not just Solana specifically. This is of course the entire crypto market. We've seen Bitcoin pulling back down towards $60,000. We see lots of altcoins bleeding out, not just Solana. You can argue that Solana is actually holding up incredibly well in comparison to many other altcoins, but it has come down into our lower range expectations, right? This being the yellow box area here with $127 to $153. Why this range? Well, this range, it actually indicates a typical wave 2 retracement. Okay, so as you can see, we have a 5-wave move to the upside, and what I was drawing down here was the idea that maybe we have a bigger impulsive breakout situation on a macro scale, and this is something that's going to play out across multiple months into another year, 2025, maybe even into 2026. So this particular move to the downside is kind of a precursor to a lot of all of those kind of fantastic things to happen in the future. Before we can go up, we kind of have to go down. It kind of goes hand in hand. So this here is a typical wave 2 retracement. And what I mean by that is it is between the 88.2% and 50% level of the initial surge to the upside. That surge is from the 5th of July all the way up to the 29th of July. That surge in itself, which was a move of 60.31%. This move to the downside, coming down just lower than the 50% fib level and heading down a little bit deeper, is the typical kind of area you would expect a wave 2 to go down to. It's also an area of interest when it comes to a B wave structure, but for now we're just going to kind of remove the Fibonacci retracement tool and kind of appreciate this, that we have come down into this area so far. So let's take this into a 4-hour time frame. On the 4-hour time frame, we have a very interesting structure here for Solana. Okay, we can see a very rapid decrease in price, and it does look to me like we have completed a 5-wave move to the downside. This means that we are likely to see an additional 5-wave move. Anyone who follows what we do here at Cheeky Crypto, or Elliott wave theory in any kind of level of detail or accuracy, will know that 5-wave patterns like this do not appear on their own. They're always coupled up with a 3-wave correction and another 5-wave move minimum expectation. Okay, it's possible that of course they turn into deeper moves and they become more impulsive, but for the most part, my expectations are that this structure is going to mirror this pattern here, what is what they call a zigzag, an A, B, C structure. Okay, now Elliott wave theory, you can love it, you can hate it, doesn't really matter. Ultimately, that's what it is, right? So when we take a look at this, what we're looking at. So we want to first of all get a good grasp on the fundamental basics here using the Fibonacci extension tool. You can see that we come down and we actually it does look like we actually fall short of our impulsive breakdown target range here, just a fraction. Let's go ahead and just sense check this. Swing high on the 31st of July at 4 a.m. UTC. That high was $185.10. So I'm going to just go back a second. There we go, find that, and we're going to move this down to the 10 cents. There we go. Now, we had this wick come down here, but failed to hit the 1.618. That 1.618 area at 157.26. We came down to a low on the 1st of August, 1600 hours UTC. That low coming in at 157.91, falling just short of this targeted range. That means that this is not an impulsive breakdown. It can still be considered a 5-wave pattern, but only under a few scenarios. And to me, that scenario would have to be an expanding diagonal for that to kind of play out. So are we in an expanding diagonal here? Do we have major concerns or not? Let's go ahead and do our sense checks and to make sure that everything is kind of going along with our expectations. So let's go ahead and see. Yes, it is expanding. You can kind of see that within here. It's expanding down. So the only other criteria is that wave 5 is longer than wave 1. For that, I am going to go ahead and take hold of a Fibonacci retracement tool. I'm just going to go ahead and measure that first initial wave. And then we're going to go over to this bounce here and see whether or not this comes down deeper than the 1-to-1. And it does. So this can be considered an expanding diagonal structure. Okay, so this expanding diagonal would still be a 5-wave move. This is gets a little bit complicated if you follow Elliott wave theory, but for the most part, that's kind of where that sits. So it's a 5-wave drop to the downside. My expectations are that we end up with a 3-wave bounce to the upside and an additional 5-wave move to the downside. Okay, so on our 4-hour time frame, expect a relief rally. That's going to be the next expectation. Don't get me wrong, we might see a little bit more volatility. It's possible, of course, that we haven't yet finished the entirety of this move to the downside. Still possible that Solana slips down a little bit more before we get that relief rally, but a relief rally is something that I'm expecting to see. We can also note on the stochastic RSI here, plenty of room to grow on the 4-hour chart. So it is an interesting one to point out. So let's go up to the daily time frame. What does that mean for our medium expectation, medium price prediction, right? What is the medium time frame here looking like? Well, on the daily chart here, we are, of course, looking at this as an A wave to the downside, meaning that we're going to look for that relief rally where my expectations will be resistance getting found somewhere between $170 and $172. And then we have that retracement into that final C wave move to the downside. Obviously, our basis here is that we do not cross down lower than $121. It's always possible, of course, that we're in a much bigger correction, and I've spoken about this before, where we actually find ourselves in a kind of 3-wave correction to the upside, and then this is going to be met by a much larger correction to the downside, where we lose that $121 and we drop down lower than $116 briefly before rallying again. One of the things I do want to kind of point out, and as you can kind of see right here on this chart, and even if you're not necessarily au fait with the charts, it's quite clear to see that this is a ranging market on a bigger scale, right? We're not in some kind of big downward turn in the market that's bleeding out heavily. After all, we saw a swing high at $210 back in March 2024, and we saw another move to the downside in April of 2024, coming in at $116. Since then, all we've really been doing is bouncing between the highs and the lows of that particular range. A rally up towards, $180, a move to the downside towards $121, another rally to the upside, hitting $192, and so forth. All we're doing is bouncing from the lows to the highs. And this is not necessarily any different. Now, it's possible, of course, considering that we have a couple of scenarios that are unfolding here. We have the idea of the correction of an X wave completing at $190, and we are looking for the Y wave to come down. Or alternatively, like I say, we're actually in a breakout situation. We just can't see it yet. So I think for the most part, it doesn't really matter as long as we kind of get confirmation of the direction that we're going in. So, taking a look at it, personally, I think we're probably going to have more of a move to the downside, but that's just my personal bias on it. From an actual technical analysis standpoint, both of these options are true until one is proven otherwise. Either way, the scenario still here is that we are to be testing out this range that I've targeted out as a typical wave 2 at $127 to $153. This is the area that we're going to find get heavily tested, and there's previous areas of great accumulation. So to me, this seems like a pretty interesting place to be. Of course, if we do break down lower than 121, I don't think it's going to fall all that much further. I do reckon then we're probably looking to test $100 to $90, and then from there, I think really you're going to get some pretty explosive moves to the upside should those levels get tested. But here, as you can see on the daily time frame, I'm not concerned about what I'm seeing here. This looks pretty much business as usual in the crypto market. Scale this up into our longer term views on the weekly time frame. Solana shows itself with huge potential to the upside. Okay, this is when we zoom even further out of the 4-hour, out of the daily. What do we see? Well, we can see that there's potential runs that are going to take Solana up towards the $2,400, or maybe even an explosive run to $5,100. Now, obviously, those targets are, real moonshots. They're targets that are technically possible within the charts because that's what we see. However, are also very difficult to achieve. It does require a significant amount of money flowing into the crypto market, potentially rolling around the crypto market, but also potentially seeing, Solana ETFs and things like that also bring in stock market money. Okay, so there's a lot of things that have to go right for Solana if we want to be seeing those kind of numbers. My more conservative targets, though, are coming in around the 0.618 and 0.786 fib levels. These are at the $688 to $1,100 to $1,200. This essentially would be a more conservative and pretty realistic price appreciation based on the data inside the charts. As you can see, and as I've said and explained many times before, we have a 5-wave pattern here. 5-wave patterns are never on their own. I'm tracking this as a C wave, but actually this is probably better suited to more being a double zigzag pattern, a WXY pattern, where we see a very big explosive move to the upside. But I think for the most part, we are going to be seeing a very explosive move where $688 to $1,200 I think is highly probable. Anything higher than $1,200 is going to be very interesting. I would be looking for closed positions above the 0.786 fib level on the weekly chart for any indication of a continued rally. But for now, as it sits, this seems like a great place for accumulation. If you weren't around in December of 2022 to accumulate, or in June of 2023 to accumulate, maybe you weren't even around in 2023 at all, specifically like September, when we saw some great value all in and around this range of $19 to $30. Since we got that explosive break to the upside, all we've really done is consolidated sideways. Don't get me wrong, this is a really interesting place to be because we can, of course, fall a lot further in price before we get into those next runs to the upside. But should we stay above $90, we have a pretty good, promising future ahead when it comes to Solana. You can let me know what your thoughts are on all of this in the comments down below. What is your long-term price prediction for Solana? And do you think we're going to be dropping down to less than $100 before we get that next big run to the upside? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found today's video useful and informative, smash the like button. If you're new, subscribe. And guys, if you haven't done so yet, go ahead and check out my other technical analysis channel just here, where I cover a lot more technical analysis on a daily basis.